Good evening. Welcome to the January 6, 2025 regular city council meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Lowquist.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, call the roll.
Beauchamp here, Goodlow here, Lowquist here, Elliott
Here.
Palmer
Here.
Thompson.
Here. Okay, we have no proclamations, awards, or recognitions. We will move to approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Wait.
Oh, okay, back up here. So Councilmember Miller is requesting an excused absence.
So moved. Second.
Motion second to grant Councilmember Miller an excused absence. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
My tool vote aye, opposed. Okay, no proclamations, awards, or recognitions. We move.
So is that a recognition, Josephine recognition?
It's on here,
It's on here? Oh,
6A.
sorry.
So we need a motion for approval of the agenda.
Motion for approval of the agenda.
Second. Motion second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
My tool vote aye, opposed. Motion passes. Consent agenda.
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
My tool vote aye, opposed. That motion passes. Page 62, item 6A. This is an appointment to the library board. Speak.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Josephine Camarillo, Director of Public Library. I'm here to happily present our newest candidate for the Library Board to serve the term 2025 to 2030. That is Emily Brown Pretz, and she will come up and introduce herself.
Good evening, Emily Brown Pratt, and I am interested in serving on the library board. I'm an avid reader. I've lived here my whole life, grew up at the public library, and I'm in Rotary with several people in the room and have known Josephine for a while, and she seems like a lot of fun, and it is a good way to try and give back to our community. So I thought this might be a way to get more involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions of the applicant? Okay, we need a motion.
Motion for approval of the appointment of Emily Brown Pretz to the library board.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the recommendation by the library board to appoint Emily Brown Pratt to the library board. Any discussion? This is an opportunity for public comment. I guess I should have stopped there. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
My tool vote aye, opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Item 7, citizen comment on non-agenda items. For online audience, we did have a couple of interests, but there is nobody signed up to speak on non-agenda items. So I will go over the rules. Each speaker's comments are limited to 3 minutes. Speakers are cautioned not to engage in conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. When you're recognized to speak, indicate whether you're speaking for yourself, a group, or both. And don't identify yourself as a candidate for elective office. Make any statements which assists or discusses a campaign or a candidate for elective office that is on the ballot. Speakers providing comments on non-agenda items may only address council on matters identified in the registration form and which must concern the city's business or over which council has control. Again, and that's it. Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
Hello, William Coleman, President of Kittitas. Regarding the handling of your public comments at your last meeting of December 16th, I believe you acted deceivingly. You directed everyone speaking on Pizza Clash to wait for the agenda item comment period. As a result, no one signed up for the non-agenda comments. I know this because I sat right next to the sign-up table and informed folks of your instructions in good faith. When it came time for the 10A agenda item comments, you instructed that they could only speak on the financial aspect of the issue, knowing full well that most parents were there to speak on parental rights. At the meeting previous to the 16th, this body voted down an amendment that would have required parental consent forms in order to attend Pizza Klatch if public funds were used. These parents had every right to speak about parental rights in the non-agenda comment period. You have all been in office long enough to know this, so I must assume you willfully played a game against the voices of the citizens you don't agree with, favoring the ones you allowed to manipulate the situation to their advantage. This was also evidenced by the council's prepared statements for their reversal vote. The December 16th meeting was all just a show, an attempt to give the appearance that this chamber cares about democratic values. The choreographed nature of this meeting smelled suspiciously of a quorum violation. This council had reached a good decision based on reason and public financial ethics, only to have it reversed behind the scenes by a couple of activist council members who put their social ideology over reason and public trust. As a fail-safe, those council members activated their DEI commission army consisting of students from the high school and the college to browbeat and manipulate the situation, utilizing the guilt trips for which they are so well known. You have proven there is no compromise with you unless it's somebody compromising for you. Your arrogance has reached epic proportions, and it will ultimately be your undoing. That's an embarrassment, that last meeting.
Anybody else in the audience wish to speak? Agenda on non-agenda item? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 8A, which is a public hearing to consider Title 15 land.
Mr. Mayor, I think we had one more person, sorry. Sorry. We have, I believe, our new fire chief to introduce himself.
Good evening, council, city staff, and community. My name is DJ Goldsmith. I've been appointed as the new fire chief for Kittitas Valley Fire and Rescue. I just wanted to come and say hi, and I'm looking forward to having many more conversations with you all and getting to know you all. So again, thank you all. I'll be back formally to have introductions with myself and Deputy Chief Moen as we get our feet wet and move forward. But just wanted to say hi and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8A, page 66 in the packet. This is a public hearing to consider Title 15 Land Development Code amendments and potential first reading of ordinance 4953. There will be an opportunity for public comment, and I have a script to read. Just have to find it. Okay, the purpose of this hearing is for City Council to consider amendments to the Land Development Code and first reading of ordinance 4953, which would implement those changes. The public hearing is now open and I ask for your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. City clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. If you wish to participate in the hearing, you must raise your virtual hand if you're online, so that may be where our audience is, or star 9 if you're connected by telephone. State your name and address, indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or spokesperson for a group. Speak slowly and clearly. One person will be allowed to speak at a time. Your testimony must only address the matter under consideration in this hearing. Any questions of staff are to be directed through council. Each person will have an opportunity to address council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. And then if more time is needed, it will be made available after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report?
Yes, there is. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dan Carlson, Community Development Director, for the record. The amendments that are before you tonight as a part of Ordinance 4953 fall into kind of 3 basic categories. The first being middle housing and accessory dwelling units. These were what came out of our Housing Action Plan and Washington State engrossed House Bill 1337. When we discussed those a little bit on December 2nd at a study session, these amendments also include amendments that would allow for extensions to approved preliminary plats and binding site plans. That's not something that we discussed then, but that is something that is related to housing. It seemed like something that's appropriate to have in this, and basically would allow for those plats that already have that entitlement to stay alive just a little bit longer. And I'll get to that in a later slide. Then the last thing is there were some minor code cleanup items which I think the main one being there was references throughout the code to transfer of development rights, of which we don't have a program. So there's some cleanup of those kind of things. As far as notice goes, our SEPA determination of non-significance was issued on October 10th. We provided our 60-day notice to.
Stand by a second. Can we?
Sorry.
There we go.
So our 60-day notice to Commerce was provided on October 10th. We did receive comments from Commerce on November 18th. We were still working through review of those when we did our study session on the 2nd, but we have included their recommended changes in the amendments as well. The notice of public hearing went in the Daily Record on December 19th. And we did receive one public comment, which was provided to council from Matt Stalder in support of the proposed amendments and sort of some of the flexibility that reduced parking and other standards in the zoning code would provide. So as far as the middle housing and ADU standards, the Housing Action Plan was adopted by council in October of 2021. It included a number of strategies addressing more of what we call middle housing. It had recommendations regarding increasing townhouses, cottage houses, ADUs, building flexibility into the zoning code to allow for more housing, and looking at creating incentives and those kind of things for more housing and affordable housing. The engrossed House Bill 1337 was adopted in 2023. It has a list of requirements related to accessory dwelling units. The primary ones that are addressed in the amendments that are before you are a minimum of 2 ADUs has to be provided per lot meeting zoning minimums. We cannot reduce or require ADUs to be less than 1,000 square feet. Previous code had a 40% of the primary dwelling or 1,000 square feet, whichever is smaller. So made a change to that. And standards like setbacks, yard requirements, those kind of things can now not be more restrictive than what a principal unit would be. So those were all in there. In the amendments that you have. In addition, to try to implement that housing action plan, staff conducted a joint study session with the Affordable Housing Commission and the Planning Commission in July to look at possible amendments. I also conducted a listener session with developers and builders in August, again, to look at things that we could do to try to address those goals and strategies. As far as the preliminary plat and binding site plan deadline extension, the code currently doesn't allow for any extensions to those preliminary approvals. So a plat that gets approved today basically has 5 years to be filed as a final plat. What this would do, the RCW does allow for jurisdictions to adopt extension opportunities by ordinance. And so that's what this would do. We chose to recommend up to 2 one-year extensions. So basically on a showing that somebody's attempting to complete that plat, but needs some additional time to do it. So that would allow, again, a plat approved today up to 7 years for that. And since this did relate to housing, it seemed like putting it in this ordinance seemed appropriate. So we have made those amendments to allow for those extensions. And so all of the amendments went to the Planning Commission for public hearing on November 14th. Planning Commission recommended approval of these amendments with one revision to Ellensburg City Code 15-330-020. That was an update that we had provided basically for bonus density and where a project could get up to 100%. I guess we changed it. The cap used to be 50% increase in density that would be allowed for affordable housing. This takes it up to 100% density, provided that at least 20% of the affordable housing is intended for 60 AMI or 60% AMI or below. That section was a little unclear, so the Planning Commission wanted us to to clarify it a little bit and provide some examples, which we have done. So we held a study session with council on December 2nd to go over the proposed amendments. And there were some changes that we made based on those, both based on comments at that study session and on the comments that we received from Commerce. So there were some density bonus items that we were proposing to delete because they just weren't used very often. Council had indicated that night that you wanted to keep those in. It didn't hurt to keep them in there, opportunities for additional density. So we retained those. There were some provisions regarding townhomes in the RS and RL zoning district that we had proposed to delete that. But again, we kept that in as a part of as a result of the discussion at the study session. There also is a prohibition on ground floor residential uses within 30 feet of the sidewalk in CC and CC2 zoning districts. And we were proposing to remove that, but we kept that in as a result of that discussion. We added the National Association of City Transportation Official Urban Bikeway Design Guides to the trail standards that are in code already. Updated that code section as a recommendation of the Planning Commission. And then our feedback that we got from Commerce, again, we can't put standards on ADUs that are greater or more restrictive than a principal unit. So we removed the minimum house minimum square footage for an ADU, which was at 300 feet before. We don't have that standard on principal units, so we couldn't have that. There's a maximum number of bedrooms that was a part of that. So we made those kind of changes to be consistent with House Bill 1337 based on the comments from Commerce. In order to approve amendments to the Land Development Code, you have to find that the amendments are in accordance with the comprehensive plan, that they won't adversely affect the public health, safety, or general welfare, and that it can't be contrary to the best interest of the city. And again, these are consistent with our housing chapter, with House Bill 1337, would encourage production and protection of more housing and affordable housing, therefore wouldn't adversely affect public health and are not contrary to the interests of the city. So based on that, staff recommends that council approve the proposed amendments and conduct the first reading of ordinance number 4953.
Mr. Mayor, as part of staff report, I just want to note that on your dais, you have 3 public comments that should be noted for the record. One from Aspen Circle Apartments, one from Matt Stalder, a builder in town, and then the last one is from Inversion Design Build, all commenting on the proposed amendments.
Thank you. Okay, so the floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address the council for initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available at the end. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak to this issue? Online?
I'll tell you in a second. Sorry, I just questioned. I made a public comment. Is that what you're?
Wish to make a public comment on this issue, I'll have you step to the dais and then introduce yourself and who you're speaking for, et cetera.
Good evening. My name's Klaus Holzer. My wife and I own Aspen Circle Apartments. And well, I could just read quickly to our statements. Providing affordable housing is a challenge in communities large and small throughout this country. So is the tendency to build outside of the urban core and to promote suburban sprawl due to current requirements for adequate parking where alternative methods of transportation are not available. Ratios of parking space to apartment size is probably the single largest impediment to cities and towns are addressing to make concrete changes in concert with revisions to the Washington Growth Management Act. While Ellensburg is just under the threshold for which this revision to the GMA is intended, our community is already facing a crisis in providing affordable housing. A major impediment to addressing that challenge within Ellensburg's urban core, is for construction of higher density dwellings while satisfying the current code for required parking spaces per apartment. The current requirement of 1.7 and 1.2 spaces for one bedroom and studio apartments respectively directly impacts the number of apartments that can be built on a parcel. This increases the cost per each apartment built. We own Aspen Circle Apartments. With a recent purchase of an adjoining strip of land, our campus is just under 3 acres. This is the largest parcel that is within 1 block from CWU's lecture halls and within 7 blocks from the downtown. Moreover, Aspen Circle was built 57 years ago during an era with different market demands and needs for this community. These two factors make Aspen Circle an ideal candidate for renewal by building new high-density units in place of buildings that are out of step with Ellensburg's current housing needs. Unfortunately, under the current code, this parcel, the size and the number of affordable housing units we can build is adversely affected by the number of parking spaces required for each apartment. Under the proposal before you, the direct impact would be an additional 40 one-bedroom and studio apartments which could be built and which would directly and positively impact the cost of construction and affordability of those apartments. For that reason, we urge that the Ellensburg City Council adopt the recommendation of the Ellensburg Planning and Zoning Department.
Thank
And attached, I have exhibits of our location. You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience wish to speak on this issue? Anybody online? Does staff have anything to add? Are there any persons in the audience who would like to add any non-repetitive information or evidence in this matter? Council, do you have any questions of staff or the public?
I have one.
For whom?
For staff.
Okay.
Under this changes in state law, it says no on-site parking standards may be applied to ADUs located within a half mile of major transit stops. Is major defined?
It is, but I may have to look that
Yeah,
up.
reinforcements coming right behind you.
Lily's behind you.
As long as it is, I just,
Yeah,
when I think of our transit, there's stops. I don't know which ones would be major.
There are different provisions for this ADU bill, 1337, and for the middle housing bill. Under my interpretation of that, none of our transit stops are frequent enough to qualify under that in this case. That could change if the frequency changes in the future, but there are slightly different, definitions to each piece of legislation.
Do we know what that frequency is, just to ensure that we don't accidentally create a conflict?
That's what I don't know off the top, but I'm happy to answer
Understood.
that.
Thank you.
But we could consider using that requirement, even though it's not a major. I mean, we could make our own definition. This, right? I mean,
Yeah, essentially there are requirements to not restrict, to have parking maximums or to not have parking minimums within that space, but we would still be able to create something similar outside of the legislative requirement in either of those bills, if you would choose.
so for our most popular transit sites, we could potentially say no parking minimums or
Right, that is not
No.
part of this ordinance, but that would
Yeah,
be an option.
something for the planning commission to maybe discuss.
And really quick, this is a question for Dale. Did we address the impact fee 50% issue?
I just spoke with the Public Works Director today. Actually, we looked at this. The park impact fees are already below the 50% of the principal unit. We looked at the traffic impact fees and they're at about 56% currently. So we will need to bring an amendment to, I believe it's Title 14, forward to become consistent with this bill. But we have until June 30th of 2026 to make those amendments. because it's due with our periodic update to the comp plan.
Okay. I think you're going to get direction to do it earlier, but thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, will this be retroactive for anything that's already in the process of permitting or plating?
These under vesting in Washington State, applications are reviewed under the regulations in place at the time that somebody makes an application. So things that are in place now would be under the standards they were in. I think if the standards were relaxed through this and something was already in process, you could look at a process for somebody to opt into the current standards.
Correct. And the only reason why I bring that up is I'm looking at some of the public comments, particularly maybe.
So we'll limit this to questions and then when we start.
All right.
Okay, we'll come out of public hearing.
No
Okay,
problem.
thank you.
So does that apply that the extensions would apply though?
Oh, yes, yeah, the plat extensions would. So, plats that had preliminary approval now would have this opportunity for up to 2 more years to extend them. Yes.
Okay, so any further questions of staff or the public? Okay, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may begin its discussion and deliberation of this matter.
Okay, so the reason why I was bringing that up was on public comment, specifically to inversion design build. I'm not sure how this impacts the current plating request for the First and Pine property. Is this something they're going to have to reapply for? Or is it fine as is?
So we're going to reopen the public hearing if you're going to ask a question. I didn't realize you were asking a question. I thought you were making a statement.
I think I can answer this. They have not submitted an application,
Okay.
application yet, so it would not, the new regulations, if adopted, would apply to them.
Okay, understood. Thank
Okay,
you. Sorry.
we good?
We're good.
Okay, so I need a motion.
I'm going to move to approve the land development code amendments and conduct first reading of ordinance 4953.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the land development amendments proposed and first reading of ordinance 4953. Is there any discussion?
Sounds like developers are excited about these changes and I hope that it yields some new projects. I did want to clarify those restrictions on the ground floor residences. It's not all of CC 1 and 2. It is just on the storefront streets, and that was in a different part of the code that describes what you can do on storefront streets already. So removing that footnote in the table would not actually have changed what is required. So just making that clarification.
Any other discussion points?
I'd just like to thank Dan and his staff for the process that you used and the community collaboration that you displayed. I appreciate that a lot.
Yes, thank you. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes.
An ordinance relating to the City of Ellensburg Land Development Code, Title 15, and amending chapters 15.130 definitions, chapter 15.260 subdivisions, chapter 15.330 density bonus incentives, chapter 15.540 housing type standards, and chapter 15.550 off-street parking.
Item 11A under new business, page 130. This is housing and related services revenue allocation framework review, and there will be an opportunity for public comment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Lily Fry, Housing and Grants Administrator. Before you this evening is a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Commission to update the revenue allocation framework, which is used to consider applications to the housing and related services, sales tax, and use funds. The framework applies to 2 income sources, the 0.1% sales and use tax adopted by Ellensburg voters in 2017, and a 0.014% rebate from the state portion of sales tax established by ordinance in 2019. The amounts raised by these taxes together total about $800,000 annually, about 90% of which comes from the 0.1% local sales tax and about 10% from the state tax rebate. They are managed together in our Housing and Related Services Restricted Fund. As a reminder, all affordable housing sales tax funds must serve households with incomes no greater than 60% of area median income, or about $47,500 for a household of two, or $59,400 for a household of four people. Funds may be used for home ownership or rental housing, though rental properties are more likely to serve populations at these incomes. Council adopted the current revenue allocation framework in 2018 based on the recommendation from the precursor to the current Affordable Housing Commission, which was planning for how to use funds from the recently passed sales tax. It has not been revised since. To date, the fund has been used to support the Stewart Meadows Affordable Homeownership Project by Habitat for Humanity and the purchase of the 1200 South Ruby Street property by Hope Source for the Pathways Project, as well as smaller studies and investments. The current framework includes up to 50% for the repayment of general obligation bonds for housing. However, the limited number of projects that have come to the Affordable Housing Commission and Council to date have not indicated a current need for bonding funds. In preparing the budget for 2025-2026, it didn't make sense to set aside 50% of funds for debt service when we have not issued bonds for housing. So we are recommending updating this framework for planning purposes. Council still has the opportunity to consider bonds if a recommended project would require. Since the city's revenue allocation framework was established, the state legislature has expanded some of the possible uses for these funds, including housing-related services and other specific additional options. Several months ago, Hope Source asked if the city would consider funding two programs that had previously been supported by Kittitas County, matching funds for federal support for permanent supportive housing, which could support the existing 5 units that Hope Source currently operates, and rapid rehousing program support, which previously assisted about 30 households to get back into housing annually. The Affordable Housing Commission does not currently have an application suitable for housing services. At their November 6th meeting, the Affordable Housing Commission recommended an update to the revenue allocation framework. They recommended allocating at least 60% to the construction and/or acquisition of new affordable housing units and/or operations and maintenance costs of new affordable housing, and up to 30% for housing-related services, retaining the 5% in the current framework for reserves and administrative costs. This adjustment would meet the state requirements for both funds and allow the Affordable Housing Commission to consider application for housing services programs like those proposed by Hope Source. You are not being asked to weigh in on those specific projects tonight. I'm just giving them as an example. The Affordable Housing Commission will consider applications for potential projects based on your guidance. If you choose to amend the framework per their recommendation, the AHC could begin accepting and evaluating applications for housing-related services. Any capital projects or services that the AHC recommends would continue to come before council for review before contracting as they have to date. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any questions to staff?
I have one. So I'm aware that the county is developing a 5-year homeless, it's just a homeless plan, not an affordable housing plan. So is that identifying any gaps that this revision in funding allocation would serve?
We're not quite there on the analysis, so we've conducted, I'm also with the other hat, helping advise on that process, but we've conducted a community survey and done a variety of focus groups, but we haven't gone through the analysis and recommendations to draft that plan yet. I expect that will come to you in the future. But we do have some funding from the State Department of Commerce to just make sure that exactly those plans align with our housing chapter update in the comprehensive plan and make sure that we're using the same data across county, city, and community resources for addressing those challenges. So I don't have an answer that this responds to that quite yet, but there's the opportunity to do so.
Well, and so just to clarify, it's basically 60% for constructing things and 30% for operation, the delivery of services.
Well, and it's 60% plus. So basically all of those capital costs, including some operational support potential for new units, that has to be the bulk of our funding regardless. And right now that's nearly all of our funding. So this would just offer the opportunity to consider up to 30% for services.
So we're under 60% where it says operations and maintenance costs of new units affordable housing. So it's just, what's an example of that?
We haven't had any applications in that category yet. And we've only had a couple of new units come on board through this funding because it takes a long time from collecting those funds to actually funding the projects to seeing them inhabited. So I think once we start to think about essentially those 6 units, so to date in the Habitat project, if they would come back with applications for operations specific costs or a different project has operations or maintenance needs, that's what we'd anticipate falling into that category. But it's to maintain those affordable units to continue to operate them and have them be in service. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm just, what is operation? Would it like a groundskeeper, or is that someone to evaluate whether they're meeting the required 60%? I mean, that the people moving in qualify, or I'm
not
sure what
entirely
that
sure
means.
exactly because I haven't
Okay.
tried to interpret it yet. I don't know if you have an answer on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can add much to it because the legislature left it specifically pretty general. And there's been no guidance, I don't think, from Commerce on that, to my knowledge either.
Okay, so this is state language.
Yes.
So, okay. Thanks.
Any further questions? Opportunity for public comment. We'll go audience first. Virtual audience? Nope. Okay, we need a motion.
Get a move for the adoption of the amended revenue allocation framework.
Second.
Motion second to approve the amended revenue allocation framework for affordable housing. Is there any discussion?
This is just, thank you, Lily, for being with us in the Affordable Housing Commission. We had some very great conversation about this. For everyone in the room, this is really about ensuring that the city or the Affordable Housing Commission is not getting in its own way with trying to entertain opportunities to address affordable housing situations. We have to think outside the box. It cannot be the traditional means and methods as far as delivering affordable housing to our community. So this is trying to open up the framework and the mindset so that if somebody comes to us with an interesting idea, we have now the avenue to be able to say, okay, we can dedicate funds to this because this meets our overall mission. So that's what this is about.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Two will vote aye, opposed. That motion passes. Page 133, managers report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Heidi Barron, Sternaway City Manager. I have a number of requests and I'll walk through the list in the manager's report in your packet, a number of requests for actions. The first is you have the opportunity to do a reallocation of just over $4,000 in council funded community grants. And just recently we received notice that the CareNet Pregnancy Center of Kittitas County has declined to accept their awarded $4,023.54 in council funded grants. And I believe there was a subcommittee that made a recommendation, and on the dais, you actually have a list of the council funded grants, the amounts that were requested and the amounts that the subcommittee recommended that you fund. And the recommendation would be that that subcommittee would make a recommendation if council wanted to redistribute those dollars. So your request for action on follow-up for that item.
And the subcommittee took advantage of the half hour in between the study session and
I thought it was a coup.
To work out a recommendation if council would like to reallocate. We are recommending that an additional 3,000 go to the Kittitas County Health Network. That would fully fund their request of $5,000, and that the remaining $1,003.54 would go to the Eastside Opportunity Center to assist with life skills for disabled adults.
Let me make that as a motion.
Also move recommendation.
In a second.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and second to take the 4,023.54, which had previously been allocated to the CareNet Pregnancy Center, to increase the KCHN funding by $3,000 and the Eastside Opportunity Center by 1,024.54, excuse me. Is there any discussion on that?
Just a quick question, if we know why they turned down the $4,000?
They did not say.
Okay.
I thought they did say there was a program they were going to initiate that I thought they decided they weren't going to have to do with women's health care.
Okay.
That alternative funding is what I understand.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes.
All right. Next item is let's see here. We discussed at the beginning of 2024, because we had a new council member on board, that council may wish to revisit the board and commission and committee appointments for the year. And we did publish last week and this week the council board and committee assignments list, and entertaining any discussion or changing of assignments for 2025.
I hear someone wants to give me UAC. It's totally fine. That's the Utility Advisory Committee.
Trade it for.
Actually, I like what I'm on right now. I'm enjoying it. Affordable Housing Commission, Law and Justice, and Kittitas County Waste. So, and Steer I-90. So I guess if you want to switch up Steer I-90 for UPAC or UAC.
That's not very enticing to Lana.
Yeah.
Give me that infrastructure. Give me that sweet infrastructure. I'll take it all day long.
I think you would be excellent on that committee. But
They too.
I'm,
Give it to me. I'll just take it.
I also,
Off here, but tell me about we could talk more about that I-90 thing. I totally
Infrastructure.
agree with Councilmember Lilquist. I think you would be an excellent addition to the UAC, and I'm happy to relinquish that position to you. I'm just not really excited about the I-90 thing.
I'll stick with that Steer I-90. I like that infrastructure stuff, man. All
Okay,
that construction is me. I love it. So
we're making that move.
so I could use another assignment if somebody else has too many.
I've got one that now conflicts. It's the retirement, the Law Enforcement Firefighter Retirement Board.
Yeah,
It's at 8 a.m., which is when I'm now dropping my kid off,
okay.
which changed since I took that on.
So the left board, is that on, okay,
Left boards,
Yeah. Got
135
it.
bottom. Okay, so we'll make
Okay.
that switch.
yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? David's not here, so we can give him anything we want. Okay, we're good.
Excellent. Thank you. And just a reminder that we've been discussing with the Environmental Commission after adoption of the Sustainability and Energy Plan early this year about changing the roles and responsibilities of the Environmental Commission. And as we move toward reorganizing our Public Works and Utilities Department and separating out our Energy Services Department, there may be some further definition with the Utility Advisory Committee and differentiation with the Environmental Commission. So we'll be looking more comprehensively with the participation of those committee members to look at their maybe differing roles and responsibilities and membership, and any of those changes would come back to you as well. So the next item is a reminder that we have a national holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, on your next regular scheduled meeting, Monday, January 20th. So your meeting will actually fall on Tuesday, January 21st per council rules. Our recommendation, because with your adoption of the 2025-2026 budget, is that we actually create a study session prior to that meeting, and that would take council action to discuss the transportation benefit district. As we mentioned, as part of the adoption of the budget, you all we're looking at bringing that item back to the voters in 2025 to renew that transportation benefit district funding and expanding that for street maintenance and transit as well. So having a joint meeting with the Public Transit Advisory Committee would be recommended. The timelines are pretty tight if that's going to go back to the voters in 2025. So request for council set a special study session for the 21st.
Need a motion to do so.
I'll move for the special study session on the 21st.
Is that at six PM?
That would be correct.
Second.
Motion second to set a study session at 6:00 PM, January 21st to discuss the PTEC and Transit Benefit District funding. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Two will vote aye opposed. The motion passes.
All right. And last item, and this is another letter on the dais, approval for the mayor's signature to support Kittitas County's application to Department of Commerce for a broadband project.
I didn't see that one, but
I
You
have
already
it if you
signed
want to see it.
So we need a
It's-
motion?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, the letter.
yes.
I move we authorize the city manager's
Mayor's signature.
mayor's signature on a letter of support for the county bead application.
second.
Motion second to authorize the mayor's signature on the letter of support for Kittitas County's BEAD application. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. I am signing it.
Thank you. And that's all for tonight.
Okay, I do want to, before we go into council member reports, just very briefly, on the agenda was the March 4th meeting with the Yakima Nation. And if I'm understanding this correctly, that's a multi-day event for them. We're on the front end of that.
I believe it is, but the invitation, I believe, was to the Tuesday evening at 7 PM, and that would be March 4th.
Okay. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we're going to have to, I mean, obviously, if four of us are there, it's an official meeting. We'll record it. We're in somebody else's building in the middle of their traditional meeting. So we need to be, I just want to line this up correctly so that we get off on a really positive footing with the Yakima Nation. So if you could begin to think about the issues that we want to focus on, and we'll make sure that that gets on the agenda. So, and we'll start with council member reports. Sarah.
Everything's coming up this week, so I am in good shape.
Okay. Nancy.
And I have no report either.
Nancy.
I attended a left meeting and an ad hoc homelessness meeting. There was a report on the cold weather shelter. They've been averaging just 7 folks a night, but they're high barrier people. People it's not easy to find alternative housing for. With the sleep center on hold, we're kind of looking at that county five-year homeless plan. And we'll have a briefing on that later this month, and then and hoping to help with some sort of public meeting on that plan to get input from folks. So you'll see more on that later. And I just wanted to say I'm excited for the urban forest management work that we approved a contract on consent agenda tonight. And I did an environmental commission interview this afternoon. And the topic of the reorganization and shift in focus or duties was part of that conversation. So I think we need to move that forward so that that committee can get a work plan for the year and start working on things. So that's all.
Delano.
All my committee meetings are coming up, so I've got nothing new to report. I do want to say that I had the opportunity to be at the cold weather shelter on the 23rd. That night, it was a little bit of a higher population. They had 9 males, 4 females. Very well ran facility for addressing a lot of the needs that are there. It's not an easy problem that we're dealing with in our community. They said that was kind of one of their peak nights, but there are issues that they have to deal with. And we kind of talked about it with the CHIP program earlier regarding behavior and mental health, and that is something that is out there. And if you talk to not only with the cold weather shelter, but even in our law and justice meetings, unfortunately, the people that are being incarcerated, we're having more and more behavioral issues, and they happen to be pretty severe. So that's something that'll be an ongoing dialogue for our community as a whole. One little comment I would like to leave from our last city council meeting. This was on my particular comments at the end of the meeting when I was talking about kind of my personal experience with a lot of the conversations that we're having. That I made a comment that said I don't understand the lifestyle, and I wanted to clarify that for those in the population here. That was my error. I wasn't trying to besmirch anyone in our community. What I was really trying to say in that is that I don't understand, I don't know personally what it's like to go through life and feel as though you don't know your identity or you have to conceal it. My identity has been what it has been my entire life, and I've been very comfortable with it. I understand that other people, that is a challenge in their life. So I apologize for that comment, but I do want to, again, thank everyone that was here as part of our meeting. Again, I was really proud of our community as far as displaying the right type of democracy. Again, we're going to have conversations where we agree and disagree, but by far and large, it's always good when we do it in diplomacy like we were trying to do the other night. So that's it.
Cool. Josh.
Christmas, last couple of weeks, I gather, was really light, so I've got nothing to add.
So just for council, if you guys are interested, the Yakima Wildlife Recovery and Yakima Basin Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board has an informational sheet here, and they did offer to come talk to us in a meeting. I talked to Nancy, who's very invested in this, and she said not a lot has changed since they last visited, so I'm going to not take advantage of that opportunity. But if anybody wants to look at this or sees a reason, I will certainly invite them. And then just over the holidays, had an opportunity to visit the animal shelter, and I appreciate the work that they're doing down there. And I would just like to point out that there are dogs, particularly some big dogs, that have been there for 16 months now.
Oh, man.
Remind me, is that
we have the county helping us out, or Kittitas County, or
Humane Society, primarily with the city.
Okay, all right.
The animal shelter.
How many
Yeah.
dogs do you have?
Well, it depends on the one that lives at my house. It's not mine.
I got 3 dogs on my capacity, no more.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a couple Great Danes.
Ooh, that's big.
Anyway, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Great Danes.
Oh, yeah.